Welcome everyone. Um, my name is Michael Saragioli. I am the Associate Director of the MA in Spirituality at the Oblate School of Theology. As well, here tonight we have Father John Markey, who teaches in the program. He's also the PhD program director, and Dr. David Pakta, who many of you clearly already know, who helps to oversee the program and also teaches in the MA Spirituality program. He's going to tell you a little bit as we go on tonight about some of the courses that he teaches, as well as what we consider to be our 3 pillars of the program. So for tonight, it's a pretty simple formula. We just want you to be able to get acquainted with the program that we offer here. We want to share a little bit about what makes it distinctive, give you a sense of the flow of the program, the expectations of the program, including application and so on, and allow you, make some time at the end to allow you to ask whatever questions we didn't cover. So I want to go ahead and the last person who I did not introduce is Ali Tao, of course, who is the program assistant for the whole spirituality program at OST. So she and I, as we move on, are going to be 2 resources. You know, if you have any lingering questions after tonight, if you want some more specifics about the program, you can go to her or you can go to me, and we aim to be, you know, as available as possible for everybody. So let's begin in with Father John Markey. As I said, he oversees the program. He's a PhD program director. He's a systematic theologian, a wealth of knowledge, as everyone at OST knows very well. And he's going to tell you a little bit about the discipline of spirituality and really, you know, something of our origin story at OST. Why do we exist, and how do we understand our mission? So I'm going to throw it over to John, and he will start us off. Then it'll be on to me and Dave as we go on.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with all of you this evening, and it sounds like people are from near and far. So, we'll try to address what we can. But one of the things about our program is that, well, let me just say something about spirituality. Spirituality itself is one thing, is in one sense it's not new, right? It's as old as Christianity. We would hold in our program, and the kind of way, especially in the Roman Catholic tradition, we think of spirituality, it's a critical component of the Christian life. It's a fundamental dimension of Christian life, because all Christian life in a certain sense is imitatio Christi. It's imitating Christ, taking on the mind of Christ, walking in the spirit of Christ, and becoming another Christ, right? So the goal of Christian living is in some ways a spirit-filled life of that's precisely that. It's a life. It's living its behaviors. In that sense, Christianity has always fundamentally been about action and life rather than ideas. You know, we don't really believe, as you know, we have ideas, we have beliefs that ground us, that shape us, but in the end, we're not really saved by ideas. We're saved through the process of entering into the life of Christ, becoming another Christ, part of the body of Christ, and an ultimate destiny is to be part of the divine life itself. So it's a participation through life, through action. We grow, change, and develop over time in the spirit, and take on the mind of Christ. So that's been part of the Christian life since the just post-resurrection period. You see it emerge and develop in different periods of the church's life in all kinds of different ways, in all kinds of
God damn it! Whoa, God damn it!
In all kinds of social and cultural ways. So it happens. There's lots of different variations of this based on the context, and so there are lots of different ways of Christian living that emerge over the last 2,000 years. And so we in no way can comprehensively offer an examination of everything, but we can show the major patterns the kind of dominant modalities, the kind of the ways that people over time in different social, cultural, and historical contexts try to embody the Christ and embody the life, the Christian life, and how they think about this project as taking on the life and the spirit and living it out, and the spiritual life, and how that's passed on, articulated, and understood over the last 2,000 years. So what's important about the discipline of spirituality, as opposed to the practice of spirituality, is that over the last 40 or 50 years, for many years, spirituality was seen to be just something the church does. I mean, I'm a Dominican, I'm part of what's called the Dominican order. I'm a Roman Catholic priest, but I'm also fundamentally a Dominican friar. I'm a mendicant, part of the mendicant movement, 800-year-old religious order. And so, I come out of that tradition. For us, spirituality is one of those things that's a core component of how you think about the Christian life. But it was always a dimension of theology that is kind of like an application of ideas. So it's the applied version of theology. In that sense, it was always a bit derivative of theology, and theology was kind of the discipline, the way of thinking that kind of drove everything. And then therefore applications of the ideas were what ministers or pastors or people who are do is kind of work on helping people live this out. In the last 40 or 50 years, there was a return to an intense kind of interest on not just the history, because there'd always been people doing the history of spirituality, the main texts, the kind of dominant themes, etc. But about 40 or 50 years ago, there became a kind of, especially in the West, an interest in how is it we should think about Christian spirituality and spirituality in general, since this is in some ways, it's a category that goes across not just denominations of Christianity, but across the spectrum of religions. So in other words, as we became more interested in thinking, how is it that human beings encounter the divine, encounter God, the category of spirituality was a kind of general category that other religious traditions would use to describe their own practice of life. Buddhists, Islam, Judaism, the Abrahamic religions, but also Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, etc. These kind of other great traditions also would use and invoke similar language, similar ways of speaking, similar practices. And so it became clear that in a certain sense, sometimes it was easier to talk interreligiously in the language of spirituality than in the language of theology or kind of beliefs or that kind of thing. And the other thing became that in Christianity itself, there was an increased interest among people who were serious Christians about kind of moving beyond merely the moral life, how to lead an ethical moral life as a Christian, or how to, preach the gospel or live it out in some kind of practical way. But in a deeper sense, how do I build on the experience of conversion? How do I deepen that? How do I grow? And the whole idea of spirituality as a personal and interpersonal journey into not just the life of Christ, but into God's own and kind of God's presence, or the way individual people actually experience God in their lives, and the fact that there's a long tradition explaining and telling us of other people who've had this experience, trying to articulate how it happened to them, how they developed it, how they grew in it, how they learned to how they made sense of it, etc. So there became an intense interest in spirituality, not just as a kind of part of Christianity, a part of theology, but in its own right, what is this reality? Because it clearly goes beyond just denominational or ecclesiastical concerns. It's something that affects human beings in their life. There's a spiritual dimension to the human person that was being identified in secular sciences like sociology, cultural anthropology, psychology, etc. They were drawing on issues like soul. What is the soul? What is soul care? What is the spiritual life? Why are humans seem to be inherently interested in this? And so it was those two kind of things that came together in the 1980s, especially, where you got this group of people that thought we need to start looking specifically at spirituality itself as a phenomena, as a reality that's central to the life of people, and Christian spirituality as essentially what the Christian person is called to, of any denomination, of any background, and how is it that we can understand that experience, we can develop it, what resources can we bring from the tradition. And so you got a movement that really became what we now are trying to do, which Ron Rolheiser, who became one of the most important voices in this kind of newly articulated spirituality project about 30 years ago, Father Ron Rolheiser, when he came to Oblate, he really wanted to start a program that would investigate spirituality in its own right and treat it as an academic discipline and a subject that could be studied and taught and examined, and not just merely as a kind of aspect of education or formation or something like that, or a part of ethics or a part of theology, but is really something we try to examine in its own right. And Father Ron, uniquely, he said that his own work is drawing on the deep wells of this tradition of spiritual encounter with God and growing and journeying in the Spirit to a deeper and deeper understanding of the presence of God in our life, and not just my personal life, but in our life and in human history, that we need to draw on that tradition and bring it into dialogue with the contemporary world, a contemporary context, so as to be a resource for that society. That, in other words, this deep, rich tradition was largely unknown, even to a lot of Roman Catholics who weren't in nuns or priests. That there's this kind of yearning for this, and it goes beyond the walls of the church. And so therefore, it's something that really we need to articulate and explain in a contemporary way in the context of contemporary life. And you see it especially in the work of Father Ron, who talks about all kinds of interactions, spirituality and healthcare, spirituality and social work, the spirituality and education. These things obviously come to mind. But there's also a kind of a spirituality inherent in many kinds of human endeavor. I mean, we've had programs and talks on people who do spirituality in sports. Spirituality, I was just in Europe last year, doing work with people who are doing things like contemplative approaches to prison management and prison life, and contemplative approaches to medicine, how to train surgeons and doctors to be contemplative, empathetic listeners, who are interested not just in the physical health and the mental health, but the full development of the flourishing of the human person. And so there's even there are courses over there. They had somebody who was writing a dissertation on the spirituality of farming. I mean, and we see this in America, lots of interest in how engaging the earth through things like how nature itself impacts us in a deeper way than just aesthetics or just giving us some hobby, but is in fact an aspect that touches us or can potentially touch us at a really deep level. And so this idea, drawing on the deep wells of the tradition so as to inform contemporary society, became kind of the way we started thinking of setting up programs at Oblate. And that includes continuing education. We do a lot of that. But fundamentally, the first and the kind of central program was this MA in spirituality that we've now developed as an MA and a certificate. We also have a PhD. I direct a PhD in this. We're the only one in the country now. It used to be, there are only 2 places in North America that used to offer PhDs in spirituality. One was Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, and the other was University of Toronto. They still offer courses in that, but the doctorate level has been kind of pushed into other fields or other areas of study. And there's a lot of places in the US, especially in Catholic institutions, where you could study the history of spirituality. In other words, look at medieval traditions or early church traditions or biblical traditions, or, in other words, look at this as a field of historical analysis, looking at the texts of medieval mystic women, or the texts of the early church fathers, or the texts of the desert movement, or the texts of the Reformation leaders, et cetera, and how they think about the spiritual life. But we're trying to do something different than just a historical retrieval. We're trying to take, a fundamental part of the program is going back and learning the tradition. But the point is to be able to draw on it into our contemporary life, our own ministries, even not just as a big project like for the whole church, but me as an individual. How can I draw on these traditions to inform my own life, to inform my own ministry, whatever that is, whatever I'm called to, and how can it inform all aspects of my life and of our life as churches, as communities of believers who are trying to preach the gospel, because the way we live the gospel authenticates it, right? It's what gives it power. And so we really have come to see that this aspect of spirituality, both retrieving the tradition and also trying to think how this impacts and develops and shapes our efforts in the contemporary reality and the contemporary aspects of reality that we encounter, like psychology. I mean, in other areas, like, for instance, in a lot of places offer degrees in spiritual formation, which is really, these are programs that work on catechesis, pedagogies of education, pedagogies of transmitting, learning skills and stuff, how we take advantage of those to form Christians in their life of faith, in the Bible, and etc. But this is something different. This is looking specifically at this area of spirituality, the spiritual life, trying to understand the ways that it was lived out in the past and articulated and understood, and how we can bring that to bear, as I say, in the contemporary world, but specifically in the MA program, in my own life, in my own work, in my own ministry, in my own, and maybe our shared mission to be servants of the servants of God, to serve people. And how can this inform us, help us, and develop us and deepen us, that we are more deeply encountering the mystery that we're in fact sharing. And so part of that is in dialogue with this massive tradition. I mean, that's the other thing that you start to realize as you get involved in this. This is huge. I mean, this is 2,000 years around, of a worldwide, very international, men and women, some people that are firmly in the church, organized church people, but also people who are on the margins, who aren't even recognized as true, ministers or authenticated or formalized, but are nevertheless deeply engaged in the life of discipleship and the life of and that they're somehow leaving artifacts, writings, descriptions of their deep encounter with the divine presence in their life and how that affects them and how it shapes them and how it enables them to serve Christ and serve their communities. That there's a massive store of this. It's just unbelievable. I mean, if you go to many of these conferences, you find they're uncovering new sources all the time. And so the way that the disciplines tried over the last, say, 40 years is to, how is it that we articulate this? How do we understand it? How can we formulate it in a way where we can make some general, so there also is an attempt to not just recover this material, but interpret it. What do we make of this? What do some of these texts mean, or what, at least put them in the context we can kind of understand what these very different thinkers and different people are, and how they're encountering God differently, or at least uniquely in their own lives throughout history in very different social and ecclesial circumstances. So as you see the list of names there, Wendy Wright, Ron Rolheiser, Bernie McGinn, Sandra Snyder's, Philip Sheldrake, these are all people who helped us start this program and get it underway, who've been with us the last 10 or 15 years as we've built up this program. These are a lot of the names that you'll see associated as founders of this new academic discipline. They have been essential. They've taught here, they've lectured here often, they've been working with students at the PhD in their dissertations, and many of them continue to be active, although as a generation, a lot of them are aging out or passing on. I mean, it's really becoming these are the people who've been at this 40 or 50 years. And so a new generation is emerging of scholars in this field. And so there's a whole list of new names that we could put down that are also engaged in our program. And that's what we're also trying to do, is try our MA program, and certificate programs are trying to, in a certain sense, not just kind of teach a bunch of ideas, but help form a new generation of people who will take seriously this vision, as we'll say again and again, of drawing on the deep wells of the tradition to inform the contemporary experience of real people in their real lives here and now. And so, Michael, I'll kind of turn it back to you, but that's just to give an overview of how I see it as someone who, as I say, as Michael said, is a philosopher, systematic theologian, but was always involved in the spiritual side of religious life because of my order and because of my own interests. And so when Father Ron asked me to come here 15 years ago and help start this PhD program, I really jumped at the chance, and have been part of it ever since. And it's been the real great, to be honest, the great honor of my life and passion of my life to be able to do this the last 15 years. So I'm very enthusiastic, but I know I need to also give time for lots of other stuff. So if there are any questions about that, and I'm sure Michael and David can kind of expound and articulate more, be clearer about what this vision looks like in practice.
Yeah, well, I'm just the nuts and bolts guy, at least for tonight. But I will say, just to tack on to what John was pointing out, the kind of community that has formed at OST is a group of people who are excited about the innovative dimensions of the spirituality project. So I moved out from Portland, Oregon. We've had people come from all across the country and all across the world to join our doctoral program. And likewise, our spirituality program at this point actually draws, just off the top of my head, from Vietnam, a number of different nations in Africa, and all across the United States besides. So it is not just a national, but a bit of an international gang who's involved in this, and it's drawing the respective passions of a number of of people in different contexts who can then inform one another. So as I just the other day was in with a classroom of students in the MA program. And I've taught before back in Portland, and there was something pretty actually incredible about the diversity of the perspective. So you'll have these professors, well, not necessarily all the professors on this list, but you'll have the professors, as John said, the kind of next generation of professors. But you also get a pretty interesting chorus of voices in the classroom just amongst your peers in the program. So that for me is something else to recommend it. So Ali, if we could jump into the next slide. So here's what I'm explaining tonight. John mentioned we have a master's program in spirituality, and we also offer this certificate in spirituality studies. So to begin with the certificate, the certificate will consist of 6 courses. You can take, one course at a time if you'd like to do it that way. You can race through it if that's your prerogative. But what we emphasize and what Dave will kind of come to speak about afterwards is we have a few courses that are sort of the pillars, the foundations of the certificate. And that is the introduction to the discipline, wherein you essentially hear more of this story. You get the full version of what John was saying about spirituality, but you also get the refined sort of methodological tools, the way in which we engage spirituality, what distinguishes it from theology, but how we're really taking up the question of evaluating human experience. So there's this intro course, a overview of the history of Christian spirituality, and then a third course that Dave's going to be excited to tell you about as well. So for the certificate, certificate, you come in, you can apply for the certificate, separately from the MA. But what happens essentially at some point, if you decide you want to switch over to the full MA program, which is 36 credits, you can let us know and sort of go through the process of making that change. Whatever that you take over from the certificate, of course, will be, good currency for the MA as well. The kinds of people, there really is no limit to the kind of person who is suitable for this program. Faith formation leaders, if you're looking in whatever your context is to enhance your ministry, absolutely. We have a wide range of people who are meeting kind of particular questions and looking for the resources of this faculty, spiritual seekers to help them out in that respect. Spiritual directors, there's really, as I said, kind of an extensive range of reasons, I'm sure as wide as the number of reasons why all of you are here tonight. So for the certificate, there's no final project or thesis. It's just a matter of taking those courses, getting that exposure to the material. So it's relatively recent. I think it was last year that we launched the certificate in spirituality studies. It's certainly your on-ramp to the program, but it's actually such a robust set of courses in its own right, that you'll get a good sense of the discipline of spirituality. So now moving on to the MA in spirituality. Ali, if you can move us on to that slide. Okay, so the Master's of Arts is 36 credit hours, and the capstone of the MA, so in addition to these core courses, there are electives that there are some more stable electives in the program, and just to name a few of them, we have Franciscan spirituality that can be taught from the Catholic perspective, but useful to anyone. The spirituality of Thomas Merton, ecological spirituality, a course in contemporary spirituality. We're always introducing new electives as well. It kind of depends on the interests of the faculty. There's a course on women mystics that will be taught for the first time coming up. It's the kind of thing that, put a word in if there's something that you're excited about learning, and that may just stoke the inspiration of a faculty member who can bring it forward. Our elective courses are an opportunity, to share. As we said, we have this PhD program as well. We have a doctoral faculty who are engaged in research at a high level. In some ways, it's a chance to share their research or to burrow down into a particular topic, and also to kind of canvas this wide territories. There's some survey courses at that level as well. So the MA is the prerequisite for doctoral studies. For instance, if you're applying to the PhD at Oblate, you can either have an MA in theology or an MA in spirituality. And of course, an MA in spirituality is the best preparation to hit the ground running in that respect. Okay, so here are kind of our 6 keys for the Master of Arts and the certificate. As I mentioned, one course at a time, or you can very well do more. What we essentially have happen are almost these sort of cohorts and groups that tend to form as you go along. So you will, no matter what your pace is, you're not going to be out on an island. There will be people who are doing the program at the same speed that you are. Now, here you're at a virtual open house. So this is nearly everything in the program at this point, everything that's offered, particularly in the MA, will be available online and in person. There are occasional courses that are taught, and this is kind of an opportunity when it comes up. Sometimes we do have doctoral courses, which are always going to be in person if you're in the San Antonio area. And again, if you have a kind of readiness to participate in these seminars, then we can get you included in that as well. So graduate level credits, of course, for each of these. What we're doing with the evening courses, with the evening schedule, is trying to make it as available as possible for people coming home from work. I know I heard about the group coming in at 2 a.m. in Africa. There's only so much we can do, but we do our best because we do have a number of time zones of people coming in. So for the MA and the certificate, it's the same application process. Of course, you signify that you would like which one you would like to join. To go through that, you can, and we will, by the way, you don't have to, rush to note all this down. There's going to be an email that comes for all of you who have participated that will spell out these steps. So you can apply through the OST website. What you'll need is 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. And you'll see on the website an indication of prerequisites. These are more flexible than they appear on the website. So if you do have a question about whether you have the prerequisites to apply, let us know and we can kind of work it out on a case-by-case basis. The deadline is June 30th, so you do have plenty of time. But the quicker, the better in some ways if you're ready to go. That helps us out to kind of know where you're standing. Essentially, what we're going to do, and we've talked about it a little bit just today, is once we go through the applications on the other end of that, we'll contact everybody who's going to be a member of this new cohort for the program, and we'll have an orientation day, a virtual orientation day, where we'll help you sort out how to sign up for your classes, and again, give you a little bit more of a reading on the curriculum. Okay, Ali, is that it? Okay, yes. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. David Pakta, the Executive Director of the ISCS. Again, he's teaching in the program as well, and he can tell you about these pillars of our program.
Thank you, Michael. Good to see everybody. And I really appreciate that you're giving us time tonight to share with you about our programs. We're really proud of them. I went through the PhD program myself at Oblate and just found that the treasure that I believe this program was worth me trying to stay part of it, even after I finished my degree, which is why I stay on there and continue now to teach there. It's an amazing, amazing experience and opportunity. So appreciate you being here tonight to give us a chance to share it with you. So just so this may come up in the questions, but I just want to make it clear. When we started the certificate program, the certificate and the MA students start together and they stay together. You take the same courses, you're in the same, so you're together in that, and you're writing the same papers, you're doing the same work. The only difference is the outcome. You either do the full MA or you do half of the MA that's a certificate. And part of the reason we offered the certificate and we decided it was important is that we found that a lot of people want to come into this program, not necessarily to get a degree, but just to learn for their own enrichment's sake. And we realize it's kind of a running joke with us is you don't get a better pay when you get an MA in spirituality. It really doesn't help the bottom line for your job, but the enrichment is why most people are there. And so that's why we have both those options for you. So what I want to talk briefly about is the core courses. No matter if you do the certificate or the MA, there are 3 courses that everybody takes as the foundation of the programs. And if you're in the certificate, then you go on and do 3 electives. And if you're in the master's, you'll take 3 more core classes and then do 6 elective courses. So the 3 courses that are core for everybody that lay this groundwork that John talked about, this idea of drawing on the deep wells of the tradition and addressing contemporary needs. We've built the core courses around that core mission principle. So the first course, the intro course, really is to introduce you to graduate studies and specifically to introduce you to spirituality as a discipline. And so we start with things like definitions. What is spirituality? Methods. How do we study it? How do we do academic research? How do we write at this level, graduate level? And then we cover biblical spirituality, spirituality in history, spirituality and mysticism. And we spend about 4 weeks reading primary texts. So we're actually reading the Desert Fathers. We're reading medieval voices. We're reading contemporary voices. So we're looking at voices that have written about spirituality or have written spirituality for the last 2,000 years. And then at the end of that intro course, we get into applying it. So very quickly, we're starting to show you this breadth and depth of the tradition, giving you a taste of it, and then looking at how does this apply to everyday life, the spiritual journey, and how we understand leadership in our faith communities. So that's just the intro course. The second course that everyone takes is a history of the study of spiritual, or the history of spirituality, which Father John Markey teaches. And he is fantastic in the classroom. It was one of my great joys listening, sitting at his feet in his course. But what Father John does is he takes you through the 2,000 years and helps you understand the development of Christian thought and of spirituality and what's shaped that for the last 2,000 years. So it's a broad, wide sweeping course that marches you through history. And it's extremely important to frame and contextualize all that we're trying to do. So if we want to draw from the deep wells, we have to understand the deep wells of the tradition. The third course that everyone takes will be really that how we apply it to the contemporary side. So it's called Spirituality and Contemporary Experience. And what we're trying to teach you in that third course is how do you now take all these voices in their context and apply it to real situations today, real issues that you're facing in your own life or in your community life or in your ministry life. How do you do that appropriately? And so we'll have an entire course that helps you to shape that. One of the interesting and I think really helpful things that, and John touched on this, is the importance of social sciences and how we've seen the integration of social sciences. How does philosophy affect our understanding of our spiritual life, or sociology, or all the other disciplines that we've now started developing and learning about? It's really given context and understanding to our spiritual lives and giving us new language. So how do we integrate that when we're really looking at our life and our contemporary situation? So those 3 courses, no matter what program you do, you would be in those, and that will give you all kinds of doorways to understand the field and even know how to select the electives that you'd be interested in. So that's all I have. We can answer questions if you, I think we're actually, I'll turn it back over to you, Michael.
Yeah, no, exactly. Let's just move on to any questions. We're going up until 8:30 Central Time. So go ahead, fire away.
You guys can just ask questions, just speak. You don't have to chat box me.
Maybe we could take the presentation down, Allie, so we can just chat together if that's okay. Perfect. Thank you.
I see one
Yes.
question here on Native American spirituality. Is that discussed at all? Yes, it comes up in the contemporary spirituality course, and it's Michael can maybe address it, or David as well. I would say that there is it comes up in other places, like in eco-spirituality, issues around ecology and spirituality, nature and spirituality. There's a lot of work in that's being done that kind of intersects with kind of other work. So, but right now, we don't have someone on the faculty for whom that's their specialty. We have people who know of that work and have tried to use it and integrate it into their own work. But it's again, one of those areas that's just is blowing up over the last 20 or 30 years, and especially over the last 10 years. And one of the things about it that's most interesting, of course, is that it's largely owned, in a really positive sense, by the Native American communities themselves, who it's no longer for a long time what you got in that field. I mean, I remember taking a course on it in the 1980s, and it was a guy from Missouri, a Jesuit priest who lived with the Lakota people for 30 years and taught about Lakota spirituality. But now, I mean, 40 years, that was just so we had some insight into it. But now, of course, the Lakota people themselves, all these different Native American people are themselves articulating their own tradition and talking about it. And it's a richer and more important than just, because that's one of the things that shifted in spirituality. It was no longer just, it's no longer just a lot of people, because looking at spirituality from the outside as if, this is really interesting. So, Margaret Mead goes to Papua New Guinea and studies the spiritual lives of these people, but in a way she treats them as outsiders, right? And what their spiritual practices is odd, or they're intriguing, but they're not. But the goal of this program is to be able to understand it from the inside. Like, what is the experience that they're dealing with? What are their understandings of the divine life? How does God present themselves? What are these people called to? And so again, that's fine, but we don't want to merely look at spirituality as outsiders studying other people's ideas or practices. It's calling us to be, it's what the language is, self-implicating. In other words, how is this, even if I'm studying Native American thought, how is this in some ways or another impacting my own thought? How can it help me to deepen my own experience, deepen my own religious life, my own religious experience, or see things in my own tradition that I hadn't seen before but might be there? So, for instance, in a lot of the Christian traditions, there are other kinds of indigenous experience of conquered peoples that are present. And so, for instance, like I say, last summer I was studying in Ireland, and the Irish themselves are conquered people who had an indigenous spirituality before Christianity came, and certainly before the British came. And a lot of what their own work now is like going back and recovering how their own spiritual life, and by the way, that indigenous way of looking at the world didn't go away. It was sometimes deepened and enriched by Christianity, other times just silenced or marginalized. But the fact is it's still present. And so you see this kind of, there was a very interesting, rich dialogue taking place between people who, in some ways, are both simultaneously, they're inheriting both tradition, this indigenous tradition that was in some ways embedded in Christianity, but precedes it, and also people who have Christian faith. And so the story of how do we, and the discipline of spirituality gives us a way of looking at that without saying one's better and one's worse, one's good and one's bad. It's like it enables us to kind of look at the richness of the reality. I know that went too long, but other questions?
Let me take Angela asked a question here that I can answer. She asked about cohorts and how they form and what happens if you continue with one course at a time, or how many students in certificate programs take one class at a time. So we just launched the certificate this last fall. We had just over 20 students come in with this cohort that were in the certificate and the MA together. So I think 22, 23 students. And most of them are working professionals. So taking one course at a time is kind of the pattern for the majority of them. We had one student that was like all in 3 courses at a time, trying to move quickly. But most of the students that we're finding, as I said earlier, are enrichment students. So they're looking more to take this as they can. And so I would say that's the majority. So you will take the core courses are spread out, by the way, over 3 semesters. So it would be fall, spring, and then you'd wait till the next spring for the 3rd core course. So everyone's together. You'll be with your cohort for those classes. Then you'll get to know other people as you take the other electives.
I had a question. You had mentioned that once the 3 core courses are finished, you can sort of, depending on your interests, decide what electives you want to take. But are there certain electives that you feel would just be really important to take if someone is just going to do the certificate that would,
Certificate, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's a great question, Janet. That depends on a couple things. It certainly depends on who you are and where you come from. And then there are certain classes that like there's an important course coming up this next semester that we're encouraging our students to take. And so, yes, in general, there are classes that you just need to take. Like if you can take a class from Ron Rolheiser, you take a class from Ron Rolheiser, right?
Okay.
But in addition to that, depending on the tradition in which you come from, your own experience where you are, there are things that we guide, and that's what every student has advisors that will walk them through and help them make those choices. So someone who might know where you come from and what it is you'd be interested in could help you navigate that
Perfect.
question.
It
You
just
may know
seems like
someone.
yeah, I definitely do. It just seems like there's so many things to learn that it would be a shame to not be kind of
That's why
direct.
you can't stop at the certificate. You end up going, oh, I just need to do the whole MA, and then maybe I'll just keep coming as an enrichment student afterwards because it's really true. Here's one of the beautiful things about OST and the way that this program's been built. We have built this on a foundation of faculty that are here in San Antonio, but our faculty is broader and wider, and we have affiliate relationships with multiple faculty that come and do courses for us on a regular basis. And so the exposure to what you can study is pretty significant. So that's one of the most beautiful things about this program that I found to be such, as I said earlier, a treasure, is I got an opportunity to learn from these top scholars from all over the world. And that continues. We have a lineup for the next 2 years of people coming in. That's just, we're excited about. We get so-and-so to come and teach echo spirituality and the Desert Fathers. And yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're all here to help you discern which classes you'd want to take. So you can ask any of us and we can talk you through the professors and you can talk about your interests, and usually we can help you find the right fit. I'm in the MA program too, so I've been through this discernment process of which class to take based on my interests. So
Philip asked a question about liberation spirituality. Liberation spirituality comes up in multiple places. It's an integral part of the study of spirituality, and it gets weaved into many of our courses. I don't know if John, you'd want to add
John's
anything to
area of
that?
expertise is this.
Yeah,
One of
you
it.
should have John Markey teach that course.
Yeah.
Which
He wrote a
one?
whole book on it.
John wrote a book
Liberation
called
spirituality or liberation
Moses and
theology.
Pharaoh's House, subtitled A Liberation Spirituality for North America.
Well, no, I've got to be, so I've written on liberation spirituality, which is a type of spirituality that is studied by people in economically and politically and socially disadvantaged locations around the world, and it's from the perspective of the poor, the outcast, the marginalized and disenfranchised. And so a spirituality of liberation is about how, because Christ and the presence of the Spirit frees us from the sinful structures of reality. But we experience the sinful structures of society and history differently if we're rich than if we're poor, if we're advantaged than if we're disadvantaged. And so if you're economically, politically, socially disadvantaged, you need to be liberated from oppression in the way that the Hebrew people needed to be liberated from the oppressive structures of Egypt. But if you're Pharaoh, you need a different kind of liberation. You need conversion. And so I point out that in North America, where you have most people in North America, I mean, there are liberation spiritualities and liberation theologies in the North American context, because there are people who are socially, politically, and economically disadvantaged and oppressed. But most people that I work with, we're the oppressors. I mean, I'm part of the oppressive class. I mean, if you travel around the world, it's not that hard to figure out. It's like, oh, I'm in the top 10%. I'm not, even though my personal life isn't all happiness and roses, it's nevertheless that I've taken advantage of, and I've prospered because I live in a society that largely is built on it's not, again, it's like Moses in Pharaoh's house. He knew he was Pharaoh's daughter's child, but he knew his true destiny lay with the people of Israel. In other words, I mean, he just grew up there, right? But he also, I mean, the grace of God, the freedom of the gospel was freeing him to see that his real destiny lied outside and in solidarity with people not like himself. And so sometimes the freedom or liberation we need is from the political, social, and economic structures that are really leading to death. I mean, that's what Gutierrez is talking about. Spiritualities that lead to death. I mean, literal death, literal loss of life. That's a different thing if you live in a bubble where you're cut off from the reality of society and you think that your world, your vision of the world is reality. And sometimes to be freed from that, to be liberated from that, is to be converted and to see that in fact you're not really seeing reality clearly, because you see reality through the eyes of someone in Pharaoh's house. I mean, you're not seeing it from God's perspective. And so I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say on this issue, and I won't do any more. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on. But yes, we have lots of interest in how it's not just, is there liberation spiritualities? Yes, there's Peruvian liberation spirituality, there's South African liberation, there's Korean and Taiwanese and Vietnamese and Papua New Guinea, and there's all kinds of liberative spiritualities. And so one of the questions is, what do I need to be, in any spiritual context, what do I need to be freed from and freed for? How can I be freed for love? If you live so economically and politically oppressed that you can barely survive, you're not really free in a way to live out the gospel. If you're living in Gaza right now, you're just trying to survive. It's not really easy to teach classes and stuff in faith and stuff. So liberation for them would mean freedom from fear, freedom from death. But in our context, it's going to mean something different. So that's a little taste of how we approach it. So yes, liberative issues are always part of any study of spiritual, because that's part of the gospel. And so if you look at the history of spirituality, you see that it comes up in all kinds of contexts. But they think of how God liberates us differently in 4th century Roman Empire than they do in, like Julian of Norwich does in the 12th century in Norwich, England, or 13th century in the middle of a plague. These are multiple, so how they're going to think of liberation is going to be somewhat different.
So we have significantly less to say about relational neuroscience, which was the next question. So we could have let you go on. I mean, the
Yeah,
answer to
sorry, I
all
didn't
these
mean to.
questions, the answer to all these questions about potential specializations, let me just say it's always helpful if you join the program if you bring it up. Because as Dave was talking about this sort of affiliated faculty network that we have, so we have the professors who are here at home in San Antonio, we have affiliated faculty members who are more sort of stably committed to the school. And then there are a number of professors who we connect with who are always very happy to teach spirituality at OST. So with a lot of these courses, it's kind of if there's a will, there's a way. I know Dave just recently, basically struck up a friendship and got us a new course in Ignatian spirituality. So that's often how these things go. And to bring in, your particular interest in your papers kind of opens a whole nother bibliography of potential conversation partners as well.
And I would just add one thing on the relational neuroscience. I mean, that kind of work is being done by a professor that we're bringing in soon to teach. So yes,
Oh,
these are
little
all
did I know.
developing, and little did you know, but this that's the significance of the network that's being developed and has been being developed is we do have all kinds of people with all kinds of specialties that will come. But then you have the problem that Janet brought up. How do you take all these classes? Too
Well, and
many great
remember too
authors.
that as a student, we also have a very vibrant and active continuing education program. We have conferences, we have book launches, we have a whole series of stuff that are not credit driven, but are free to anyone who's a student. So there's almost everything we do is online. So and by hybrid. So all the lectures, we sometimes have, lectures that aren't necessarily just on spirituality, on biblical studies, on theology, on different aspects, more practical, like series on, Michael did a great series on the Enneagram. We have Daniel Renault's now doing a series on
A whole number of mystics, one on Carl
Dreams.
Jung.
yeah,
too.
different mystics and how they interact. So all that's available to you. I mean, you'll see each month there's just lists of things. We have a Sankofa Institute for African American Black Church Studies that has speakers every month, major people from all over the world and all over the US that come in. And so all that's available. So we have stuff in Hispanic spirituality, Hispanic pastoral studies. So it's just like it's like sometimes I can't even keep up with it all. Like students will say, "Oh, can we go to this lecture on?" So I was like, "I didn't even know we had that, but sure, write a description of it and send it in, and you can get some extra point credits or something." Yeah. So all of this is there, and part of the conversation. The other thing I saw is someone asked about scholarships. There are scholarships. Most everybody qualifies for partial scholarships with cases, we can take it on a case-by-case basis and in terms of your needs, et cetera, and how we can help you make it possible to attend. But yeah, we understand that, that this could be a real challenge, but it's also one that, we will try to work with you as much as possible to help meet the demands you have. It's just,
Yep.
there is financial assistance available at the MA and even at the certificate level.
Okay.
I think we're wrapping up, right, Michael? But I just wanted to say to all of you, I know that there will be questions that you have as you think more about this. You're welcome to reach out to Allie, to Michael, to John, myself. We're happy to help answer questions. We will offer another one of these as well in the next month or two, I think. So you're welcome to come back or send a friend, but we're happy to answer any other questions you have directly.
And let me just say this, honestly, I'm going to just be honest with you all. Ask Allie any questions you have. I mean, she knows more about the program than all of us. I mean, Allie's in the program. She's worked as all of our assistants, Dave, mine, the MA director. She knows more about this than any of us. So like, and I would take her advice on what class to take. Like, she knows the professors better than I do. As a matter of fact, sometimes I say is like, how is that guy as a teacher? And she'll be like, oh yeah, So I just want to say that, like the richest resource I can offer you at Oblate in terms of our MA and certificate program is probably Allie, who is the point of contact anyway, but is also the person who's just simply.
Yep, it's all true.
It's
second to
true in
motion.
any
It's all
institution,
true.
right? All of us
It's
that
all
work in the
true.
church know that the associate is always the person who actually knows what's going on. So don't ever ask the pastor. I mean, he never knows. But ask the assistant, and she'll always be a wealth of information. But we're really grateful that you just took some time. We are really open to any questions. We're open to any conversations. And once you get in the program, we're open to ideas. I mean, when somebody said something about neuroscience, I mean, sometimes we can't develop, it takes a while to develop a course, but we put conferences on all the time, or we do short little projects like with continuing education and stuff, or bring in a speaker. So, the goal of this is the students are part of the program. They're not just receiving it, they're part of it and are contributing to it. And sometimes you're our biggest source for how to develop this aspect of spirituality. And you're doing it. Like, sometimes it's like, okay, go figure that out and let us know what you discover, because there's all kinds of dimensions of spirituality that we're discovering in the 15 years. We've discovered as much terrain as we've laid out. We literally, it's like an exploration of what a massive and complex and fascinating project this is.
Yep.
But it's completely ecumenical. It's completely open to anyone, regardless of where you're at, what level you want to do it. For us, it's our desire to share this project with as many people as we can. So,
all right, well, look out for an email from Allie that will be coming up in the next few days. And as we said, feel free to share with anyone else in your community, and feel free to ask further questions as they arise, whenever they arise. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good night or morning or whatever it may be.
yeah, wherever you are in the world, good
Yeah.
good with that.
Good
Take
to
care.
see you all.